Good morning, everybody. My name's Roland Palmer. I'm the current chairperson of the New Zealand Esri Users Group. I'm being joined today by Claire Thilo, who is head of GIS training at Eagle Technology, Wendy Seister-Gomwe, who is with Auckland Council and also a committee member and the communications lead for the New Zealand Esri Users Group, legend from Esri Education team and Esri Education Manager Joseph Kursky, and Dr. Katie Corson from Massey University. And welcome to a conversation about GIS and education. Now, I'm going to kick things off. We'll start with GIS and Schools program, Joseph, and I think we're about to make an announcement, and Claire might be making an announcement as part of this user conference series that we're running right now. But Joseph, can you give us a bit of background about the GIS and Schools program?
Oh, it would be a huge honor. First of all, thanks for inviting me, and it's great to be with all of these fine colleagues. I have great respect for the community that you have built over the years. This is a long-term commitment, right? Nurturing and supporting the use of geospatial technologies and spatial thinking in schools, universities, technical colleges, et cetera. And so we're in for the long haul, right? It's a community of like-minded folks saying, you know, this actually matters to education, to society. So in brief, Roland, I would say that despite challenges, GIS, geospatial technology, and spatial thinking in, let's just talk about schools for the moment, since you asked specifically about primary and secondary schools, worldwide is advancing. Maybe not as rapidly as we would all like, but it is advancing in part, and feel free to chip in, Claire and others, because people are realizing, you know, we've got some serious problems on our planet, right? Climate, natural hazards, water, energy, I mean, you name it, population change, habitat loss. These are serious issues that impact our everyday lives increasingly. And to solve those, we need students that are empowered to be change agents. Yes, we like geotechnologies. It's a great career skill, but beyond all of that, there are higher and more noble goals. And that is really empowering those students to make wise decisions in whatever field they go into in their future after they graduate from schools, universities, et cetera. So that's really the higher and more noble goal. The challenges are many, and we could chat about those, but despite some obstacles, and education's a big societal entity. We would like things to change maybe more rapidly than they are, but there are wonderful educators that are visionary that really see the value of not just geospatial technology as an inquiry-based tool, but all inquiry as valid models of teaching and learning going forward. So there's a lot of reason for optimism and encouragement. I'll just close it off there by saying that we, Esri, Eagle Technologies, others, are fully committed to helping educators and students, deans, provosts, university presidents, and others make this happen. You know, so providing software, curricular items, the network, the community, the advice for programming, the spatial data, all of it, the field methods to making it happen. In other words, we're not just here's a set of software and now go forth. It is, how do we help you be successful with this?
Can you tell me, when did we actually launch the GIS and Schools program and basically, you know, through Esri, free software for every school in New Zealand? What year was that?
So officially, this GIS and Schools program actually started about 20 years ago with ArcView 3, which was free to all schools in New Zealand. But for ArcGIS Online being free to all schools in New Zealand, it would be about 5 years ago now.
I never knew that. ArcView 3, I remember starting on ArcView 3.2a in the first sort of like Windows version of ArcView. I never knew that ArcView 3 was available to schools 20 years ago in New Zealand.
Yeah, it was. For a lot of schools, though, it just sat in a box on a shelf and they didn't know what to do with it. For some schools, like Chiltern St James and Lower Hutt, they took it, they ran with it. We had about 5 teachers in New Zealand that set a whole program up with lessons and all those sorts of things that are available for schools to actually do in New Zealand 20 years ago.
Now, and if I could add a further confirmation, Roland, on what Claire is saying, New Zealand educators have been really global leaders, because when you look back at the, you know, some of the clunkiness of, you know, Claire kind of touched on this, software, you had to install it, you had to work with your IT staff at your school, all kinds of issues. Where are you going to get the spatial data? All of that were major IT tech barriers in doing this. And the teachers in New Zealand, and I met some of them way back in 1999, 2000 era. One of them actually came up to my house here in Colorado and actually stayed with me for several days, and we chatted about all things geospatial. But they have been leaders, and they continue to be so today. So it's a shining light in the world of geospatial technology and education. So I just wanted to give you all.
I'm so pleased to learn that. I think that's incredible. ArcGIS Online has revolutionized GIS learning, and especially availability of software to schools. Katie, how is working in a university? And I guess you're frontline. You're a tutor. You're dealing with students. You're dealing with learners. How has GIS changed the way you operate?
That's a good question. I think for me, it's about being flexible and engaging with students who are coming in with a whole spectrum of experience with GIS softwares, whether it's open source or ArcGIS. And so what we've started doing at least is embedding small GIS projects and scaffolding them within our courses. So then it's about the challenge of how do you capture the interest of students who have never been exposed to the technology before, as well as continuing to upskill students who may have had some exposure to it, perhaps in schools especially. And so it's about taking students through that pathway, and that's kind of challenged me and my colleague John Lowry down at the Palmerston North campus, and Rachel Summers as well, who helps us out a bunch to try and figure out how exactly we can do that. And then of course the added complexity of working across both internal students and our distance or online ones. And I think for the students who have really become interested in GIS and story mapping especially seems to be a big one that they latch onto. A big part of that is exposing them to different opportunities and the variability in which that software can be applied. So that's something I've now carried through, not just in university work, but also engagement with schools as well.
Cool. On another topic, and actually I'm going to ask Wendy something, and we tend to think of GIS and education, and for some reason we jump straight to school children or university attendees and that, but education is across the board, and Claire, you're running learning labs and education for GIS professionals. Wendy, how does an organisation like Auckland Council, which is a very large organisation, deal with keeping people upskilled and maintaining like best practice? And me and Joseph had just had an email conversation recently about the tech is evolving so fast, and how do we evolve people along with it?
Yeah, that is a huge challenge for an organization as large as Auckland Council. I think sometimes the best way to communicate some of these really complex scenarios is to break it down into stories and case studies. We tend to take an approach of really launching out our technology and explaining what the governance and rules are about that. Providing them training opportunities, because they often don't know where to find that, whether it's getting in touch with Claire, whether it's directing them to free online learning. So all of those things are available, but it's often working with their peers and colleagues who have been in touch with the technology and understand it a little bit more that help them guide them through that process.
Yeah, I think there's so many opportunities, and Wendy alluded to it, that there's lots of online self-paced type opportunities as well. So with every company that has maintenance with Eagle and Esri, they get access to the Esri Academy, which has web courses and documentation and tutorials, and then there's learnarcgis.com as well, which has even more material in there as well. And that tends to be the focus of Learn.ArcGIS is that really new emerging technology, which might not be quite settled into the stack yet, but it's got, real benefits for the community to actually use it. So there's huge amounts of those. And I think one of the other things that we had sort of on the agenda to talk about was MOOCs. And so those are huge opportunities as well. And those tend to be over a 4 to 6 week period, and you can just go in and a week's material gets released, and you can go in and do that week's material, and then you can go in the next week and do the next material on your own sort of timetable as well. And that's fantastic because you've got a huge worldwide community that you can ask questions about on the subject that you're looking at as well.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of our business GIS users go onto those MOOCs, learn a lot of things, come to us with questions about how do we do this within Auckland Council? How do we do this within our model of working? So those are really useful. It's up to us as an organization, as a business unit, geospatial, to go out there and make sure they understand how that works within the framework of the organization, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember when, and it's the Esri Academy now, but it used to be just the Esri Virtual Campus, and taking courses on there years ago. Probably, I'm not going to say how long ago, and then MOOCs were that new thing that evolved, and they're a lot more structured. And I like the idea of it is spread over 6 weeks, so it is about a commitment for this period of time and this set of hours. Joseph, where's the future of MOOCs? From an Esri perspective, we want to see more of them, and I know a lot of professionals who every time one comes out they sign up for it and they want to do it, and then they finish it and it's just like, when is the next one coming?
Well, good question. To answer that, a little bit of a kind of where we're coming from with the MOOCs. First of all, to Katie and others in full-time academia, we don't want to compete with what higher education is doing and doing very well. What we want to do is supplement and add to the wonderful things that they are doing. So another thing that we want to do, and this threads through all of the work that we are all into together, right? That we're all jointly moving this geospatial education needle forward in many ways. We want to, when we commit to something like as you folks well know, to teach in a scaffolded, rigorous way takes a lot of time. And that's one of the things that educators have, of course, grappled with over the last year with, all of a sudden I have to teach online and I've never done that before. How do I do that? And to do it well, just like any face-to-face or hybrid instruction, requires care and feeding. And so all that is to say that we want to do these well if we're going to do them. And it requires, as you know from all of you listening to this that are instructors, it is a worthwhile endeavor, but we want to do it carefully. And so that's why there's not that many actually offered. And another thing that it touches on is the whole idea, as you were describing, that we want people to go through these in a sequenced way as a community and have a cohort of people that they're now building their network around. And so there's plenty of, Roland, you mentioned the Esri Academy and so on. There's plenty of things that you can take independently, no shortage of that. But the idea here, of course, is, hey, let's go through as a cohort and learn about image analysis or coding or spatial analysis. I do not know exactly what we've got planned. But there's two schools of thought. One is, let's provide more core basics like the image analysis, Earth Imagery at Work MOOC. Yeah. But then there's also, hey, we're hearing from the community. We want something for data science or for health, or we do have that one on location analytics, so more focused on business. So, we're trying to balance should we provide more of these? And we'd love to hear from the community. Again, should we provide more of these sort of core that a lot of people should know in geospatial technology, or should we, tailor these so that they're focused on a certain industry, which could be natural resource management, public safety, and all of the ones that I mentioned earlier, health, et cetera, engineering. We could do something with BIM, CAD, and GIS in the architecture, engineering, and construction space. The sky's the limit. So what should we do that would bring the most value to the community? Of course, when you ask that in a conference like this, yes to all of the above is usually the answer, right? So it's just like you folks at the university, Dr. K, okay, well, what do we have time for? Where do we have the expertise? How can we supplement what the, in this case, higher education community is already doing? That's wonderful. So good question, Roland. I will send you an email about, some future plans that that you can maybe share if I can find out more before the conference starts.
Excellent. I guess that's always the challenge from an education point of view, is providing what's wanted and needed, as opposed to hey, we could always deliver something, but it's if nobody wants that particular widget that you're trying to sell, that's the trick question. Katie, how does a university deal with that? Around structuring a program? Is it based on the wants and needs of and that feedback loop? Joseph just mentioned we'd love to hear from the community, and the New Zealand Esri User Group is constantly going through this phase of we want to hear from our community, and at times we don't hear enough to help us form and make decisions. How does a university function in that space?
I wish I could say that we were flexible enough to always be responding to the immediate needs and interests of our students and of the broader community. Unfortunately, there's bureaucratic processes that delay that somewhat. I think it's probably at least a couple years out. But I do know that among New Zealand universities in general, there is an increasing move towards having a core thread of GIS in their programs, whether it's scaffolding of certain courses within geospatial science, or if it's actually starting to formulate and think about what a GIS minor or even a major might look like. So those are conversations that are really starting to happen, I think. I can certainly say, at least for Massey, they are. And, in terms of kind of responding to the community, I think that's where it's been really helpful for me to be engaged in outreach that brings in industry professionals, because then I hear from them that, when I invite them to come and do an event with high school students, they're saying, it's really easy for us to train people, to have them do the MOOCs or put them through one of Eagle's programs to upskill them. But what they really need is all of the critical thinking, ethical conduct, the bigger thinking that wraps around that to understand the issues that they're using the technology to work with. And so what that has helped me understand is that, yes, introducing students to the technology is important, and that's something that we can do in our classes, but we don't necessarily need to make them experts in everything. Additional training is available and out there that can supplement that, but that it's important to maintain that balance between essential skills and all of the big critical thinking and understanding around environmental issues, for example, that ties into that they also need. So that's something kind of interesting that's come out of those discussions with community members, with geography teachers, with high school students.
And I think you're seeing that in New Zealand schools as well, because they are currently doing a review of the geography NCA standards. And currently we have GIS specific ones, but the review of the NCA standards for geography are saying, actually, we need to wind GIS through everything as I guess, something that can support all of the geography curriculum rather than being specifically just focused on GIS. And there's also been the question raised of, is GIS something that we should just be teaching in geography, or should we be seeing it out in other subjects in the schools? The geography teachers, I think, want to use it as a way to encourage people to do geography at schools and say, come and do it. We're doing digital technology, come to our subject. I think the GIS professionals would like to see it out across all of the schools, so the business people are getting it, so that the history, so that the other science subjects are getting GIS inside of their programs as well.
Yeah, even the arts programs. We think about things like story maps and telling stories. We can fit. We all know we can fit anywhere inside the education realm. Just on that, and it's a funny question that somebody asked me the other day. Is it time we dropped the acronym GIS? Nobody wants to go there.
Are you asking the geographer or the geospatial professionals? Because I think we'd probably have a different answer for different reasons.
My take is, and I'll go first, I like the term GIS because of the system component and the 5 components of a system. And it's not a piece of technology, it's actually a whole system. That's my thought. So I think keep GIS, but I'm dying to hear if other people think we should drop it and move to terms like location analytics or geospatial technology, or how do we describe our industry?
Well, I was part of a conversation about 5 years ago now with Unitech on how they best describe GIS. Do they change the name of the courses from GIS to something else? One thing that didn't come up was geospatial technology. There were a couple of other suggestions which expanded on what GIS was, geographic information systems, geographic solutions, and geospatial analytics. So there were a couple of options that came up, but not geospatial GIS or geospatial technology. But I definitely would agree with you, Roland. I like the idea that it is a system. I think the other alternative would be, the S in GIS could be system or science, because I believe that is true to what we do and what GIS is.
Thanks, Wendy. Claire's going to avoid the topic.
No, I was actually just going to say it probably depends on the audience that you're talking to. So, for example, if you are talking to GIS professionals, we all know what GIS is. So I'm happy to use GIS in that situation. But if I go into a classroom full of students who maybe have never seen GIS in their life before, I might be talking about location, or I might be talking about spatial, just because they can get their heads around it more easily than GIS.
And I would just add to the discussion, I hope it's a valuable addition. First of all, Roland, you run your own business. Claire and I are at private companies, but all of us, even, Dr. Corson there at the university, Wendy at the council, we all have to do some marketing of our own program. And so, in universities, for example, you see these emerging data science programs. One could argue that GIS professionals have always been data scientists. We may not have called ourselves that for years, but you could make an argument that we've always wanted big data and lots of it and rich data and so on. But I understand, it's structuring and it's a marketing, and you got to attract students to the program, and you've got to, be seen as being innovative and so on. So I guess I'm less concerned about what it's called, kind of like my colleagues are saying here. When we work with, one of our goals is to do exactly what you folks are speaking about, and that is especially in higher education, a little bit in primary and secondary, but trying to spread spatial thinking and geotechnologies to different disciplines. So in the primary and secondary world, it's not just geography and social studies, as Claire well knows, it's science, it's chemistry, it's physical science, it's environmental studies, it's math, it's history. It could be used in lots of those different disciplines. And in higher education, certainly nowadays in health sciences, business, and data science, we're starting to see some real uptake of geospatial as a viable teaching tool, and somewhat in civil engineering as well, to be determined in some of those disciplines. But anyway, in those different disciplines, they may call it, in the School of Public Health in a university, health informatics, or in business, location analytics. And to me, okay, call it what you think is most appropriate for your audience. But the most important thing is make sure that people see maps and spatial data as analytical tools, and not just, where is New Zealand? Where is Colorado? Where is Auckland? You know what I mean? Like maps as reference documents, moving them from that to maps as analytical tools. That to me is the most important thing.
Do you see, is there a role for the New Zealand Esri User Group, and specifically the committee in communications, I guess, Wendy, with our membership around how do we assist? How do GIS professionals, how do we convince them that they are a part of helping schools, or part of helping universities, or part of helping other learning initiatives?
Well, can I give an example of where GIS professionals have been really, really useful? So we have a girls' college in Wellington, and they took some of their students up to MPI, and they basically just showed them what they did as a job in the spatial team. And the girls apparently went back to the college and went, oh, is that what they do? I hadn't really understood that. That's what we've been learning about, and that's how it's applied in the real world. So I think it's really important that GIS professionals get involved in just letting students know what they do, so that they can go, oh, I might actually think about doing that at university if they're high school students, or they have some idea of the practical applications of what GIS and geospatial is all about.
Yeah, so if I can dovetail off of what Claire said, she highlighted exactly a point that I had listed in my notes. And that's really that I think GIS professionals are uniquely placed to showcase the variety of how you can use the technology. And I've hosted a couple in 2019, and I'm doing some more this year, GIS and Drone Camps. And for me, drones is the way to get the engineers and and some of those other kind of groups of students besides just the geographers captured. And then they come along and say, oh, this digital mapping thing is kind of interesting, and oh, this is how you can apply it and use drones in it. But one of the reasons that the camps have been so successful, and I've actually this year I'll have more professionals come along to them, is because a real key part for me is showing students these pathways. So yes, I can have cool activities that get you interested in these technologies, but at the end of the day, students want to know that there is a career pathway out there for them. And if they don't want to know, then their parents certainly do. So having professionals come along and bring stuff, I think that's the coolest part. If you bring examples of projects, or I had one person who came in and held up an iPad over a piece of paper on the floor, and a 3D model of White Island floated over the piece of paper. And the students loved that. And so bringing in the kind of stuff that you use, showing them the projects that you're working on in very non-jargony terms is a really good way to engage them. And I think the lead on from that, and another thing that geospatial professionals can offer, are internships. And they don't have to be paid internships. They can be short projects, but I think those provide either high school students who maybe go into vocational training, or university students who are graduating or soon to be graduating, offers them an opportunity to actually work in the environment that they're considering, or some kind of job shadow program even. I remember when I was in high school in the US, and in our second to last year of high school, I think there was one day where we could all go and do a job shadow. And so we went and spent a day with somebody who worked in a position that we thought might be of interest to us. And for me, I realized that, no, I don't really want to wake up at 3 a.m. and make pastries all day. So I'll go and be an academic. Wasn't quite like that. But anyways, I think those opportunities are really valuable. And as somebody who works in university, I'm always looking for those opportunities for my students, but it's really hard for me to find them. And I think in New Zealand, especially because it's a small country, we all know each other, that it's really easy to create those opportunities for our students if we're just really good about communicating them.
And if I can just add to what Katie said, we have an organisation called Shadow Tech in New Zealand, who specifically on a specific day, you can actually get people, students in, high school students in, to shadow you. So if people wanted to get involved in that, I can pass on details about Shadow Tech. And the other thing is just on that intern opportunity for students. A lot of higher education programs in New Zealand do actually have an intern paper. So if you can find out at a university who's running that intern paper, you can say, hey, look, we've got this organisation, we've got some cool projects in geospatial that we might want to have an intern work on. And that runs every year usually for most of our higher education organisations. So that's a way to get connected as well and help with those intern opportunities that Katie talked about.
Look, as I said, this could go on for hours. We could sit here and discuss a whole lot of things. I'd be very happy to spend the rest of my day here, but you are all very, very busy people. I think we'll close up there. And if I'm taking some points from today, it is about learning. We need to make sure that we're still innovative in the way we're providing education. The technology is evolving, and the way that we teach technology needs to evolve. But we also need to be very mindful around the wraparound stuff, as Katie pointed out and Wendy pointed out, the mentoring, the support, the humanizing the technology and its use, and thinking about the bigger picture, and seeking out that why component rather than just this what a piece of technology does. And I'll close with, I think everybody who's watched this, there's been some hints, or is watching this right now, there's some hints around how you as GIS professionals can help in education, job shadowing, opening up and showing the human side of what a GIS analyst does, just some of the experience that we can offer to students or people wanting to learn. They don't necessarily have to be at school or in university. They can just be somebody who's interested, and we have an opportunity as professionals to share some of that stuff. So I think we all have responsibility, and I like Joseph's term of creating change agents and the next set of change agents to help. And most GIS people I know, we all quote that thing, what do you do for a living? Actually, I help make the world a better place. And if we can be helping also the world, but helping the people on it and creating those next change agents. I have really enjoyed this discussion today. Thank you all very much for coming on. I know the timeframes aren't great, and it was a bit of a race to get you all here, but I'll close up by thank you, Joseph, thank you, Katie, thank you, Wendy, thank you, Claire, and thank you to everybody watching this presentation or this discussion. We hope it adds value to you all.